Hello everyone, welcome to another Rosterfy webinar. We have a brilliant session lined up today all around how we can let volunteer data demonstrate your leadership. It's going to be quite interactive. We're going to be doing some things we've never tried before on these webinars. So we're going to try and use some Slido and get some interactive questions and answers throughout the session as well. Really happy to be joined today by Rachel Stewart. Rachel, some of you might have heard of before, very experienced professional in the volunteering sector. Worked at some amazing charities, the likes of Dorothy House Hospice, Spurgeons, Barnardo's over the years as well, and recently started a career and leadership coaching position as well. So he's going to talk today a little bit about how data can be used to help fuel decisions in leadership and how we can apply that to making volunteering programs as good as we can. Do you want to just quickly say hi, Rachel?
Hi everyone,
Like,
really nice to be here today.
excellent. Thank you very much. This could be a really good session. So we've got, I think, around sort of 25 minutes worth of content. And then, as I say, we're going to weave some questions throughout, but we will also allow for about 5 minutes of questions towards the end as well. So thanks very much for everyone for joining after the bank holiday. I'm just going to double check that the Slido system is working. So just to get us started, if you guys wouldn't mind just using your mobile phones and actually signing up via the Slido link. As I say, we've never done this before, so hopefully we get through this with no technical glitches. There is a code on screen that you can enter. So I'm just going to give that just 30 seconds or so for people to download that. As I say, we will use it throughout. And I will do a quick introduction shortly to Rosterfy as well for those that haven't been on one of our webinars before. Okie dokie. Cool. I think I've allowed enough time. So if you have any questions or any issues with Slido or wanted to just put some questions in the chat instead, feel free to fire those through as well. We do have a question section within the GoToWebinar platform, so feel free to put your hand up and ask questions as we go through. We'll just start with a quick test just to make sure that we can get some answers to come through. So what do you find most rewarding part of your job? If we could just get a few answers through on screen, that would be excellent. Just lets us know that this is working. Got a couple of participants typing, I think. Here we go. Excellent. Excellent. Some really good ones coming in on screen there. And I think really common theme in the volunteering space is the people and connecting to those wonderful causes that everyone looks to support. Every day is different. That is for sure true. Empowering volunteers to shine. Good answer. Whoa, lots of cool answers coming through. Excellent. This is good. Good bit of tech. So I'll give Martin a pat on the back for bringing this in because this is something we'll use quite often. I think it's a nice way to make these sessions interactive. So thanks very much for submitting those through. Can clearly see this is working. So excellent. We're all very well set up for the rest of the session. As I said, there will be chances to interact throughout this session throughout. So Rachel will ask some questions as we go through the slides, but there is Q&A sections as well. If you want to fire some questions through to us, please do, and we'll make sure they're answered either through the course of the session or after the session if we run out of time. Very, very quick introduction to Rosterfy for those that haven't met us before. So Rosterfy really were founded in the volunteer management space. Three of our co-founders were volunteer managers. We started from a background of taking young people out of university and college and helping them develop their CV. So Rosterfy was really founded on the basis of the fact that lots of jobs and opportunities in the market to get employment require experience, but actually it's very, very difficult to get that experience without the employment. So what Rosterfy really was created to do was to help those young people to develop their skill sets, develop their CVs, and connect with organizations that they're passionate about and causes that they want to come and help. So at the time, we were an organization that were partnering young people with local charities, local events organizations, citywide programs. And organically that grew over time to tens of thousands of people in a database that we place with different partner organizations, help them develop their skill sets and so on. And it became quite tricky to manage, make sure that they'd all been screened properly, that they were sufficiently onboarded, that we had clear visibility on which organisations they'd been placed with and what skill sets each volunteer brought to the organisation. And that's really where the technology branch of Rosterfy was founded from. So it was built to help manage that kind of initial organisation that was all around volunteer management and developing young people's confidence in their CV, and organically has grown from there. So the technology aspect of that organisation started to be leased out to various different partner orgs that we were working with at the time. And now here we are 10, 11 years later. We've supported volunteer programs in over 35 countries through our platform, and have just surpassed, that slide's actually out of date, we've just surpassed over 150 million volunteering hours powered through the Rosterfy platform. So we know a thing or two when it comes to volunteering data. Lots and lots of data in the platform and insights that we can learn, not just from the UK charity space, but globally as well. So we're in a really good position to kind of talk to those trends and hopefully help you with some of that data and how you use those insights to create a compelling program for your volunteers. As I say, a bit more background around us. So I'm talking to you today from London Bridge. That's where our UK office is based, and most of our customers are actually based in the UK percentage-wise. We do also have offices down in Australia and a couple of offices in the US as well. So as I say, we've supported lots of different programs in different languages and accessibility requirements as well. There's lots of different enhancements coming around the accessibility piece and the user interface. We also have some product enhancements coming soon around AI and data analytics as well. So there's some really, really cool things that we're going to be able to do in the next few months around how you can facilitate and use that data in your volunteer database to help learn and create a more compelling experience for those volunteers. Some of the logos on screen that we've worked with, obviously, if you want to come and have a conversation, we're very open to matching you with some customers that might be similar to yourselves, but also just taking each charity case by case. You know, you all have different volunteer roles, different size programs. We're very proud to support a real wide mix of different charities, from nationwide ones through to really local small community programs. And if you're just thinking about better ways to engage your volunteers at the moment, please do come and chat to us. You know, no obligation, just feel free to come and have a chat, and we're happy to share ideas and talk you through some of the stories that some of our customers have achieved. So please do reach out and ask away. So we've got another question on screen, and then we're going to hand over to Rachel, I believe. So just a quick question around do you know how many active volunteers you currently have in your program? I suspect most people probably do know, but it can be a difficult number to calculate. Quite often it's difficult to see once someone's come and volunteered once. How do we know if they've come back and volunteered again? It can be quite tough to figure out the wood through the trees in terms of who's actually engaging with the program. So yeah, we see some quite varied answers to this question. And sometimes when you think about it a bit more, you actually start to doubt yourself whether you do or not. So yeah, it's an interesting one. So we've had good number of responses coming through, and yeah, as I expected, most people feeling like they do know and have an accessible database to access that information, but also interesting that some people on the call don't. So as with any volunteer program, if you are managing volunteers in a database, that's a great kind of store of records, but inevitably you will have steps that happen outside of the system: training, scheduling people into events, inviting them along to taster days and stuff. Can be quite hard to track their engagement across the whole program. So that's something that we try and achieve, is that full supporter picture within your database. So on that front, I'm going to hand you over to Rachel, as I say, very experienced head of volunteering professional. So Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself, and I'll let you take away the content of the session, and we'll engage with questions throughout.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks everyone for joining us on this day next to the bank holiday, Monday. Very brave of you, so thanks for being here. And yeah, as Sam said, I've spent nearly 20 years in leadership positions in the voluntary sector, but now I'm working as a career and leadership coach. And the reason I'm here today is really to help try and think with you about how you can shine a spotlight on your achievements and grow your influence. So it's really about you. And in that, what we're going to think about today is how you let volunteer data demonstrate your leadership. Do you want to move on, Sam, to the next one? So in terms of what we mean by data, I thought this was a pretty good definition. Data refers to raw facts, figures or information that can be collected, stored and analysed. It can be in many forms, such as numbers, text, images, audio or video. On its own, data has little meaning, but when processed and interpreted, it becomes information that can support decision making, research, or understanding. So I think the really key thing to think about is that when we think about data, sometimes all we think about is numbers and stats. It's an awful lot more than that. It's all kinds of information, really. And I think one of our key roles as volunteer managers is thinking about how we present that information, how we make it meaningful, and we shape it in such a way that people can buy into it. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. I'm sure you all know lots more about data, um, but I think remembering that we can present it in so many different ways to so many different audiences and thinking about that context is really important. Thanks, Sam. So, just coming to you, what do you find most challenging at the moment about using data in your role? Be really interested to hear what your thoughts are. Gosh, that's really interesting. Still going.
I think we're about there, Rachel.
You think that's it.
I
So
think
yeah,
so.
so lack of tools, yeah, and communicating with stakeholders, that's really interesting because we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Um, Limited support and data interpretation, not so much. So it's not so that so the problem isn't so much actually being able to interpret the data or the support you're getting, but the main problem is lack of tools. And obviously, Rosterfy is one way of supporting you, but obviously, not everyone has budget for these bigger tools. So, what might you use instead? And communicating with stakeholders, which we're going to talk a little bit about. So, yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for your input. I think we're on to the next one, Sam. So I've spoken to a lot of people over the last few months, and some of the common problems that they've talked to me about are these ones. So, which is one of this is obviously what you've just talked about, under resourced and don't have the tools that we need to collect data. And obviously, that is a big stumbling block. And budgets again factor into that heavily, and whether or not you've got budget to do what you want to do. Um, I guess it's about what you have to have, what basic information you need to collect, and maybe there are other ways of doing that if you can't afford the bigger solutions. I think there's some more speech bubbles to come up. So here's another one. Other teams often get credited with the work we do. I don't know about you, but I used to work across a big organisation with lots of teams and departments. So actually, I wasn't the person managing the volunteers directly. And the problem is that sometimes the credit goes to the teams that are directly managing the volunteers and they don't see all the work that you've put in behind the scenes. And here's another one. We're so busy showcasing what our volunteers do that we often don't blow our own trumpets. And that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we talk about Volunteers Week and recognising volunteers and all the nice things we like to do. And it's so important, isn't it, to say thank you to our volunteers. However, we sometimes forget in that mix to actually say what it is we've been doing as volunteer managers and leaders. I think there's one more on this side, Sam, as well.
I wasn't sure how many there'd be. Is it
Yeah.
four?
So, yeah, the time that we actually spend nurturing volunteer relationships is invisible to those around us. So, unless you spell it out, the people around you won't really know all the time that you put in inducting, training, supporting, looking after your volunteers, picking up the phone, helping them with their problems with IT, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and all those kinds of things that go on behind the scenes. And if we don't actually talk about what we're doing, even though it seems a bit clumsy sometimes to do that, then people don't see it. And I think there's a question in the middle, Sam, as well. So we have talked about barriers already because we have the Slido slide. Are there any other barriers that you want to mention in the chat to Sam at the moment on the back of these common problems I've brought up? I'd be interested to hear if you've got any other thoughts. I don't know if you just see the chat, Sam, do you, or do
Uh,
I?
Actually, my colleague Martin does, but he sat next
All
to me,
right,
so I'm looking
okay,
over his shoulder at the moment. It might
okay,
take a while for those to come through as people think about them.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, in the chat feature in this thread, there's a little questions box on the top right corner. So that's where people can submit questions through or their thoughts through on this. We'll just give it a minute to see if any others come through. But I think certainly resource is a big thing. I think quite often volunteer teams are quite stretched and have to wear many hats and do lots of different roles. And I do sometimes feel for, I do often feel for volunteer managers because I go to a lot of these conferences and webinars, and there's lots and lots of great ideas about all of the great things you can do to improve your
Yeah,
volunteer program. But it's a priority exercise, isn't it, Rachel? Around, we can't do everything.
no.
Have you got any advice on kind of if there's five great things that we've got ideas around of what we could do to improve our program, but we can only do one or two of them? Have you got any thoughts around how you kind of prioritize those things?
Yeah, so we're coming to that actually, because I think
Oh,
that
always, sorry.
yeah, no, that's a really good point because I think that ties in with what we're thinking about when we talk about being strategic as a leader and actually making sure that our organisation sees that we're doing things that are in tune with their key mission firstly. So if we work on that first and we can evidence that to the organisation, then we might be in a stronger position as well to bid for more funding for what we're doing. But I think we do see lots of nice, bright, shiny ideas around, don't we? And it is easy sometimes to get a bit mission creep. So, like, we think, oh, that'd be a great idea to do some micro volunteering, but actually, how does that fit for
Yeah.
what my organisation needs? So, I think it is difficult, and I'm not claiming to have all the answers. I'm a coach, so I ask the questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is very difficult. But I think the more in tune you can be with the mission of the organisation, and take those as your priorities, the more influence you're going to be able to hold, and the more you're going to be able to say, well, actually, look, we've achieved this. Now, can we
Mm.
have money for that X, Y, and Z? I don't know if that
Yeah.
answers the question or
No,
if
it
anyone's
does.
got a better answer, but
So thinking
yeah,
about which ones might help you demonstrate the value of volunteering to the charity and ask for,
yeah,
because it is a misunderstood topic, I think, volunteering in charities
yeah,
sometimes. Not every charity knows where volunteers sit in the organisation, and
no,
yes, so demonstrating that value is important. We have had a thought come through from one of the audience, so this is a very relevant one, I think. Untimely data requests from line managers or partners can be disruptive. I'm sure that's something that you've experienced in the past, Rachel.
yeah. I don't know. Is there an answer to that in terms of trying to be? I don't know. We're going to talk about data and reporting in a little while, so maybe that might sort of help with that one. I suppose, is there a reason you can't ask your manager ahead when they're going to expect reports and what they're going to expect? And we can be proactive as leaders, can't we? And we can say, well, actually, I need a schedule, and it would be helpful to me if I had a schedule because then I can, you know, won't be put on the spot, and I can think about it and put better thought into it and produce you a better report. I don't know. It's not easy. I know.
Mm,
You do get a lot of, and in any role, you get a lot of
yeah,
unexpected requests. But I think as a leader, it is on us to push back where appropriate.
yeah, agree. Another thought on this is hugely relevant as well. Volunteer managers have to be experts in so many different areas. For example, HR, marketing, data analysis,
Yeah.
but other teams don't realise that.
No, but we can make them realise it, and I think that's something I'm really passionate about with this coaching is we can actually open people's eyes by the way that we present our information and share what we're doing. And if we're really great ambassadors, we can open people's eyes to what we're doing. I do believe we can.
Yep, absolutely. And I know we'll go through in the session, but I guess helping people with how they demonstrate those sorts of things. I don't know if you have like a framework that you use when you're pulling those together, or whether it's each different kind of function has its own way of tracking the success of something or demonstrating the value of something. Is it kind of a case by case, or do you kind of
I
have a
don't
general
have a
way that you?
framework as a
Yeah.
coach or anything like. Yeah, I don't have a framework, and I'm not here. As I said, I'm really not here with all the answers. I'm just speaking from my own experience during my time in the sector. But I think as a coach, what you do is you work with people in their context, and you look at their context, and you see work with them to see where they could be going with that information, who they should be, who their key stakeholders are, is a really important one.
Yep,
So yeah,
absolutely. Should we move to the next slide?
yeah. Sorry.
Yep, that's all right. Oh, we've got another question.
Oh yeah. So this is just a segue, isn't it? Thinking about that leadership piece actually that we've been talking about. So, what is one word that comes to mind when you think about leadership? Guidance. That's a great one. Vision. Yeah, I like that. Champion. Yeah, we've been talking about that. Authority. Wow. Empowerment. Transformational leadership, motivating and empowering. Yeah. We've got a lot of empowerment, haven't we? That's really
Yeah,
interesting.
it's an interesting theme. Yeah,
Is that us, do you think?
I think there might be a few more. Still see some people
Enabler.
typing.
Enabler, enabling. That's a lovely one, isn't it?
Mm, cool. I think that's about it.
Great. Wow, some fantastic thoughts there. Yeah, and I do think empowerment is really important when we're working with volunteers and with staff and managing volunteers as well, helping other people to do that. And actually, that whole thing of it's not all about us, it's about other people. And that is very much the volunteering piece. But I think the contrast to that is to say, well, remember, it is about you too and about what you're doing. So there's a balance there, isn't there? But yeah, great. Thank you very much. So, moving on and thinking a bit more about leadership, we've been talking about communicating powerfully, and that was one of the things that you brought up on the first Slido. Well, was it the second Slido exercise, the one about problems or barriers that we have? And one of those is about how we communicate. And this is a quote I really like from Volunteer Scotland. It says, as volunteering professionals, we often lament that we are not listened to, our departments are not invested in, and that volunteering is undervalued by our organisations. We need to get better at shouting about and sharing the incredible impact that we know volunteering has on our organisations. So I think it really sums it up, this quote, because it's down to us to actually do the shouting. And we need to think about how we communicate really well. And data can help us in that. Because if we've collected enough information and enough data, we can really evidence the impact of our volunteer programs and therefore showcase what it is we've achieved for our organisations. So I think there's a subsequent Slido slide following on this, Sam, on the next one. So I'm just wondering, in terms of regular, consistent communication, that might be, do you have an annual report? Do you report quarterly to trustees? Have you put something in place, if there isn't anything in place, to ensure regular, consistent communication with stakeholders? And that could be people in your organisation that you need to influence, so the trustees, senior leadership team. What communications have you got for them? Is it outside your organisation? Are you running commission services and you have to report to commissioners? What other processes have you got in place to ensure that there's regular communication, and what kinds of communication are you giving? So stakeholders on the volunteer newsletter mailing list, that's a great one for sure. Really nice way of putting out those news stories, isn't it? And feeding into quarterly people data dashboard. Yep, that's your really hard numbers and figures stuff, isn't it? Probably. Monthly updates to exec, quarterly to trustees, monthly to volunteers, quarterly reports, attending management and leadership meetings. That's a great one, isn't it? Because you can actually talk about what you're doing. And if you're enthusiastic and excited about what you're doing, it's going to come across. Reporting to external commissioners, KPI report, partnering meetings. That sounds good. That sounds great way of talking to other people in the community and other partners about what's going on and what you're doing. Okay, so there's loads of stuff. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, real mix as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like the mix of there's a lot of face to face here as well, isn't there? So there's face to face, there's the newsy stuff, the newsletter, the kind of chatty stuff, the telling of stories, and then there's that kind of more formalized reporting. So there's a really good mix. Do we think that's it, Sam?
I think so. There's some really good answers in
Yeah.
there, though. Thank you for everyone putting some time and thought into
Yeah,
that.
thank you
It's
ever
really
so much.
interesting stuff.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think that's probably really helpful for the group as well. So for you to know what everyone else is doing is really helpful.
yeah, I'll obviously we normally do a follow up and send the recording round of these sessions. I will see if we can compile some of these answers into that as well for you all. Obviously, they're all anonymous, so we're not sharing who's submitting which ideas, but the ideas that are getting thrown in, I'll see if we can share those around in our follow up with you all.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So, yeah, so moving on from that and thinking about how you might use data as a leadership language, some of the key areas I thought about, and these are only three key areas. They're not the only areas that you might think about. Are strategic leadership, and we've spoken about that already. That's about the bigger picture and how do your volunteering programs align to your organisation's mission, and how can you use data to show that? Inclusive leadership, so that's thinking about equity and diversity and equalities and diversity. And that might be around, so it could be around how embedded you are in your community. It could be around the demographics of your volunteers and how they relate to either the demographics of your service users or the demographics of the whole area that you're situated in. It could be about your staff and volunteer relationships. I don't know about you, but certainly in my last role, what I found was when I started out, there was a lot of inequality, if you like, between volunteers who volunteered in retail and volunteers who volunteered in more, if you like, professional roles. So inclusive leadership encapsulates lots of things, but how are you using data or how might you use data to demonstrate that? And lastly, financial leadership. And I know a lot of us don't like to talk about finance too much because we think, oh, volunteers aren't free. They don't come for free. We have to put in a lot of effort and time to look after them. And we don't want them to be seen as taking people's jobs from them. And we don't want them to be seen as replacing paid workers. However, there are savings that we do make and there are efficiencies. So it's really important to showcase that. And it's also a great way if we can evidence the impact of something we're doing to get more funding for things. So, as I said earlier, if you can show that you're really on point with your organisation's mission, then that's a really good way of getting an in to get more funding for something else that might not be quite so on point, perhaps, or something else that is on point, really, but you haven't been able to do. So I'm just wondering which of these, A, B, or C, comes most naturally to you. So I think the next slide asks you to put in one of the letters. So what do you feel most confident about demonstrating with data? Strategic leadership, inclusive leadership, or financial leadership? Okay,
Got a
that's
standout
interesting.
favourite? What is that? Is that what you expected, Rachel? Out of
It
interest,
is
did you have a
kind of,
hunch or?
I had a hunch. I did kind of think that people would feel most comfortable with strategic leadership and being able to show that they're, yeah, because most of us understand what our organisations are trying to do, and most of us are really, we're passionate about what we do, and we're really keen to get our volunteers on that mission too. So yes, I'm not entirely surprised by that. And I do think there's something to be said about starting from where your strengths lie as well. And we are going to think later about what you find most difficult, but I do think it's a good place to start. So if you think you're strong on strategic leadership and you think you can evidence it, well, focus on doing some of that, making sure you've got that in place first, and then deal with some of the other things. So inclusive leadership, financial leadership. So I think it's interesting that financial lags right behind, and that's a food for thought. I think an interesting one to maybe take up further at another time, maybe. So if
Absolutely.
we move on, sorry, were you going to comment on that, Sam?
No, I was just going to say it's an interesting topic that could be one that we do in the future.
Yeah,
Financial leadership and using that data, that sort of feedback's really helpful to help us shape future sessions like this. So that's
yeah,
useful to know.
yeah. So, just to dig down a little bit into each of these and not to bore you too much, because I'm sure I'm teaching Granny to suck eggs. Strategic leadership, as we've said, is about showing how your volunteering offer aligns with your organisational mission. I really actually like this statement about strategic leadership, this example that's given here. Our volunteers contributed 1,200 hours to the literacy programme, helping increase student reading levels by 25%, aligning with our strategic goals of improving education outcomes. I'll tell you the reason why I like it. It's because I know that at times I've assumed that people know what I'm talking about. So I've spoken to people and said, oh, we've done this or we've done that. These are the figures, these are the statistics. We've got this 25% rise. And I've left it at that. I haven't spelt it out and said, that's how we're aligning. That's how we're aligning with our strategic goals of improving education outcomes. And I do think when you write reports, and I'm probably speaking to people who know better than I do, but I do think when you're writing reports, it's really important to spell it out, and it's really important to showcase to people how you're actually achieving what you say you're achieving. So I really like that one. And then the other thing you might use data for in terms of strategy is forward thinking. So that's about, what will guide my recruitment, my training, or how can I improve my services? So how can I improve our operations? How can I make them more efficient? How can I make them work better? So you can see in the example that's given, they had no show rates that were problematic, and they reduced those by introducing flexible scheduling. So they'd done a bit of research into what was going on to find out what was wrong with their volunteering, why it wasn't working, and then they'd use that data to influence going forward. So you can use data to influence decisions going forwards. And not just for you, but for the whole organization. So you could be saying to your manager, your senior leaders, etc., this is what I found. How do you feel this would fit if we do X or Y or Z as a result of that? So don't keep it to yourself. I've been a good one for keeping things to myself, and it's quite hard sometimes to share it and to know who to go to. But I think it's really important that we do that. So I don't know whether you've got any ideas you want to share in the chat in the little it's a box at the top right, isn't it, Sam? You said
Yeah,
about how to demonstrate that you're strategic using data. But if you do, perhaps you'd like to share those now, and Sam can let me know what's come through.
definitely. Nothing so far, but should we
Nothing so
go through the
far.
three sections, and then when those
Yeah,
questions drip through, I can
yeah,
kind
we've
of
got
feedback at the end.
Q&A as well.
Because
Yeah,
I appreciate these
okay.
questions might take a while to type out as well. So,
Yeah,
um,
okay,
so we
lovely.
feel free
So
to, as
moving,
we go through, we're going to go through the three examples, guys. But if you just want to drop in
yeah,
questions or thoughts around any of these topics, please do.
that'd be great. Thanks, Sam. So the second one we talked about was inclusive leadership, and you were a little less sure about how confident you feel about demonstrating that. So that might be about showing how volunteer engagement strengthens your footprint in the community. So it might be around your community and your partnerships with others in the community. And actually, I know in my previous role that a lot of our volunteers had a core role, but they would come along to events and support events in volunteering, and they would go out and do talks, and sometimes we'd have shout outs for people to go and help in our shops, and some of the volunteers that didn't normally go would join in with that. So there's a whole raft of additional things that volunteers bring with them, and the way that they sit into your community and represent your community is really important to think about as well. And another key thing is to think about your volunteer demographics. And I know well, a lot of people have problems getting younger volunteers, not everybody, because it depends on who you're providing your service to. But it could be that you've got a particular target group of volunteers that you need to be thinking about. So is it younger volunteers, or is it actually volunteers, BME volunteers, or is it volunteers who've got particular lived experience? And do you need your volunteer demographics to match that of your service users, or do you need it to match the wider community, or a bit of both? So it's kind of being a bit clear about what your key priorities are in that, and they may not be the same in all places. So if you live in a very not diverse community, then you might be thinking more about the age range of your volunteers than the ethnicity of your volunteers. So it just depends on your context. And you can see here as well, I think this is really encouraging, the example, because it's not an example of, oh, we've achieved it and we've succeeded and we'll sit back on our laurels. It's saying only 3% of our volunteers currently identify as BME, and 8% of our clients do. So we really want to get that balance there. So what we're doing is we've got a targeted outreach strategy, and we're developing partnerships. So if you can't actually show that you've achieved something, there's no harm, is there, in showcasing the route you're taking to get there? And I think that's worth bearing in mind and really important as well. So that's all on inclusive leadership. And then lastly, financial leadership, which was the one that everybody was a bit struggling with a bit more. So I think really there's been some really heavy stuff about calculating what our volunteer roles are all worth, and kind of to the most, dotting the i's and crossing the t's. I don't think we need to do that, but I think we can easily pick some key role in our organization where we can easily identify that we've made cost efficiencies. Admin is a really good example. So I'm sure you probably have volunteers doing admin tasks of one sort or another, and you can easily get a pitch salary for an administrator off the internet, and you can then work out, so long as you've got a pitch estimate at least of hours, you can work out how much your volunteer administrators have brought in value to the organisation, how much they're saving the organisation, because otherwise you'd have to pay staff to do that. And I'm not suggesting we replace staff. What I'm talking about is admin duties that are probably, maybe coming and doing filing and doing the things that our staff don't have time to do. So really valuable extra. So I do think it's definitely worth thinking about cost savings and efficiencies. That really does speak to your finance team very loudly. And if you can evidence that you're making savings and so forth, it's really important. And we are in a climate where that is really tough. Budgets are really tight. So being able to do that's key. However, on the plus side, we can spend time explaining how much value our volunteering adds. So you might have volunteer programs that are pretty much volunteer led. Um, and lovely add-on things that you wouldn't be able to offer if you were just running on paid staff. So, we had a visiting service, a home visiting befriending service. I'm sure lots of you have things like that. It was completely pretty much driven by paid staff and then all volunteer led. So that adds enormous value. And again, if it's in keeping with your mission and very clearly in keeping with your mission, then it adds even more value in the eyes of your senior leadership team. So, and then that enables you to ask for more money, really. So you can say, this has been terribly successful and we want to expand it. Or this has been terribly successful, now we'd like to try that, which is similar but tweaked. Or this has been terribly successful and here's another project that's very similar, but will be more in line with the mission even than this one is. We'd like to try that. And it might be that you're bidding for money internally from your finance team, or it might for your budget, or it might be that you're trying to get an external bid put through, or you're writing that yourself, depending on your role. So I think there are really good ways that you can actually demonstrate that you're a financial leader using the information that you've got to hand. So I hope that's helpful, especially to those of you that were struggling with that. I hope that's just it's a very broad brush approach, but may just be a little bit helpful, hopefully. So
Absolutely.
moving on, and you'll be glad to know we're getting there. Just think of which aspect of leadership you'd like to improve the most. Which one is it?
Even spread.
It is an even spread. Oh, going. So stakeholder communications come out. Oh no, it's gone again. So inclusive leadership and stakeholder communication, and I think inclusive leadership we all know is a hard ask. So I'm completely with you there. Stakeholder communication, I think, is really, really important. And if there's one message I want to get across today, it's actually think about who you need to influence and how you're going to influence them. It's really important. So, yeah, interesting. Thank you very much, everyone. So, just to round up, here are a couple of ideas and thoughts. Some places to look at. You probably may be familiar with Helpforce and the Helpforce website. They largely support the NHS, so they support volunteer managers in hospitals and in healthcare. But their website is a fount of information, especially if it comes to evidencing your impact. They're pretty expert about ways to do that. So I definitely say they're worth a look at. The two links below that are for annual reports. And I think some of you mentioned annual reports, but if you are in an organisation that produces an annual report currently for the whole organisation, how largely does volunteering feature in that? And can you advocate for it to feature a bit more if it doesn't? And if you don't produce your own annual volunteering report, could you do that in a bit more detail and a bit more depth? There are some really good examples out there on the internet. I've just given you a couple. And on the right, there's an example of using infographics, which you're probably all familiar with, but they're really punchy, powerful way of kind of presenting those key figures and information in a very easily and impactful sort of way that people can take on and assimilate. So those are just some ideas of places to go away and look. And I think you're sending out the slides, Sam, you said, didn't you? So
We'll
people
share
will
them
get
after,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. So basically, in summary, using data as a leadership toolkit is trying to make sure that you're using data to show you're aligning with the strategy of your organization, that you're improving the operations. Remember that example of trying to make a service better by consulting around it. Advocating for equity, whether that's equity between your volunteers and staff or between your community and yourself as an organization. tell compelling stories. We didn't talk a lot about that, but it's so important. And I like the fact that so many people talked about newsletters. In my last role, we had a volunteer who supported a patient to link up with some long lost family, some long lost relatives that he'd not been in touch with for years. And to do that, we linked up with the volunteer, linked up with a local library to get help to locate the relatives. Um, the community was involved, and the family was reunited. And that volunteer then gave his belongings to the hospice on his death. And in addition, he had some really valuable documents that went to a local museum. So that is a really fascinating story. And sometimes I think these things just happen. They happen so much that we don't think to pick up on them, and we don't have the time always to pick up on them. But it's really worth just taking a few minutes to jot down some of your stories, and then maybe get other people to write them up, or get your volunteers to tell stories that you write up for your newsletters, etc. So I think that's really important and can be really compelling when you're talking to trustees or senior leaders. And leading with influence, we've talked a lot about this, and it isn't about who's got the loudest mouth. It's about who puts across their information in the most canny way, I guess, and to the right people at the right time. So I hope that's been helpful today. And just to think about on the next slide are a few pointers to maybe think of as you go away. How are you currently using data? And what ways are you communicating to your internal and external stakeholders? Sorry, I've got a dog scratching at a door. Just bear with me a minute. Do apologise for my dog. Um, what barriers do you face? So we've talked a lot about the things that come in our way. So it's in coaching, that might be something we talk about and think about. How can we overcome those barriers? Why do we have those barriers? Are they real? Are they genuine? Or can we actually work around them? And what support or tools do you need? So I hope that's been helpful. That's pretty much the end of the presentation about data.
Really good.
Um,
Thank you so much,
thank
Rachel. It's
you.
really, really helpful. We do have so Q&A, brilliant. Feel free to submit those through on Slido. We've also got, I'll leave this on screen at the end, but at the end here, there's an area where you can connect with Rachel. Obviously, she's offering her consultancy and thought leadership services at the moment. So we will leave her details with you all so that you can take those away with you. Just quickly before we come on to the Q&A, just wanted to mention we do have a webinar. This is part of a wider webinar series. You will see all of the previous webinars that we've run on our website, and we've got some that are coming up as well. We've run a nationwide volunteer management survey. So on the topic of data, I think that about 300, 400 volunteer managers that responded to that. So we're going to be sharing the insights and the learnings from that survey across the peers in the industry. So we do have a live event in London and one in Bristol. And I think we've got an online version of that coming up as well. The next webinar that we've got coming up is a really interesting one, talking about wearing different hats as a volunteer manager. It's actually about how volunteer managers actually become marketeers. And we've got some really interesting guests. So we've got a couple of people from the team at Guide Dogs who will be joining that one to present with our head of marketing, who sat next to me, Martin, and also Emma Pete, who is the event manager for Formula E. So 3 different industries all collaborating around how we use volunteer data to actually market towards the audiences that we're looking to engage. I'll just come back because we have a bit of time for questions. I mean, we booked the session for an hour, so we've got 10 minutes spare. There are a few thoughts that have come in on here, Rachel. So one at the bottom, I guess.
Mhm.
Thanks, Rachel. How do you humanize the data from your program?
So I guess that comes back to those stories, doesn't it? And actually making sure that you've got stories alongside your stats. So we're not just talking about stats, as I said at the beginning. So I think those stories really pull on the heartstrings of people quite often when you hear about volunteers going above and beyond and doing all sorts of additional things to maybe what's in their role description. But I think that's a great way of humanizing the data, and that would be my key answer to that, I think. I think the untimely data requests, that's a difficult one, as we said, but I do think there is something about us taking leadership in our own roles and standing up for ourselves in a good way and saying, actually, I can't manage that at the moment. How would it work for you if I did it then? Or would it work better if I produced this on a regular basis for you so that we don't have this problem arising because I'm too short of time to get it done? So I do think there's something about taking that leadership stance sometimes in that. And then the lack of knowledge around volunteering in other areas of the organisation, and volunteering not considered a priority in a big organisation. So I think that is around your stakeholders, and sometimes it's a lot of effort, isn't it, to get to know people in other teams and other departments well. And I think it is about building those key relationships. So start by thinking where you what nut have you got to crack first? Where do you need to be going first? Who's your key contender? Who do you need to win over and influence? And spend time thinking about how you can link up with them. And it might not be that they can spare you time to sit down and meet. It might be that you know just have a quick 5 minute chat over coffee to start the ball rolling, just to talk to them about what you're doing so that they're a bit more aware and how it might relate to what they're doing. So I think there are ways, it just takes time and effort. And I know that the problem is a lot of us don't have the time. I'm sure we're all willing to put in the effort, but the time can be a bit of an issue. So managing your time well is another thing that we can coach on, talk about. So I'm really here to help you, and that might be to help you grow your influence where you are. Not everybody wants to move on, but it might be that you want to take your next career step, and that might be in or beyond the sector. So some people have used their transferable skills. I met somebody the other day who'd moved on to be a membership manager in a different organisation entirely. So yeah, I'm here to help. And if you're interested, I'm offering 5 free 40-minute career strategy calls. That QR code will link you to be able to message me and say you would like a call. I'm very happy to do that, and we talk about where you are in your career now and where you want to go with it. So it's kind of a matter of first come, first served for those. But would really love to hear from you if you're interested.
Brilliant. That was excellent. Thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you
Thank
everyone for
you.
joining as well. And I really appreciate your first time we've done the Slido polls throughout the session. So thanks so much for the engagement there. There were some really good answers and feedback that came through. Any other questions that you want to submit through, feel free to do so. We'll make sure we get kind of written or follow-up answers to any of the questions that come through. We will send around a summary of today's session. The recording will go onto our website, but everyone that signed up initially will get the recording emailed to them with a summary note of some of the answers that were talked about in the polls as well. So thank you all very much for joining. Been a pleasure to have you all, and hope to see you again next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.